I walked into the flat I legally owned, and minutes later law enforcement was telling me to leave. My husband's girlfriend stood behind them, confident and calm, already acting like the place belonged to her. The situation wasn't an accident. It was arranged carefully with the expectation that I would stay quiet and walk away. Before I tell you how that moment unfolded and why it changed everything, take a second to support this story. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment about where you're watching from. It helps stories like this reach people who've been pushed aside in silence, just like I was. The officer's voice was polite, almost rehearsed. Not rude, not aggressive, just detached. Ma'am, you're not listed on the lease. The residents have the right to ask you to leave. Residents, not owner, not wife, not the person whose name was printed in bold on the property documents filed with the county. I looked at the officer closely then. Early 30s, clean uniform, badge catching the light from the hallway fixture. The kind of face that followed procedure, not context. The notepad in his hand mattered more than my expression. Behind him stood my husband's girlfriend. Arms crossed, ponytail pulled so tight it lifted her eyebrows slightly, giving her that permanently satisfied look. She didn't avoid my eyes. She wanted me to see the confidence. Did she call you? I asked, already knowing the answer. She said she felt unsafe, the officer replied. She reported an aggressive entry. Aggressive? I'd walked in carrying a canvas tote with groceries and a small box of pastries from the bakery downstairs. Still warm. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't knocked because I'd never needed to before. I own this flat, I said evenly. The officer paused, pen hovering. Do you have proof of ownership with you? I opened my mouth, then closed it. My documents were in the main bedroom, inside a fireproof lockbox, behind a door that now had a keypad installed, a keypad I had never approved and didn't know the code to. That's part of the problem, the girlfriend said gently, stepping forward just enough to be heard. She gets confused sometimes. This used to be her place, but things have changed. Changed. The word landed heavier than it should have. We've been trying to handle this privately, she continued, voice soft, almost sympathetic. But this is starting to feel unpredictable. I laughed then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a short, involuntary sound that surprised even me. Unpredictable. I had paid off her credit cards 2 years earlier when she cried at my kitchen table. I had helped furnish this flat before she ever slept here. I had stepped back when my husband said he needed space, believing distance meant honesty. Now I was being described like a liability. We're asking her to leave voluntarily, the officer said, just until everything gets sorted. Sorted by whom? I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed. Because arguing on a tiled entryway with a stranger holding authority wasn't how I survived things. I stepped back outside. One of the pastry boxes slipped from my tote and hit the ground. The lid popped open. Powdered sugar scattered across the concrete, like evidence of something wasted. Okay, I said quietly. I walked to my car without looking back. The hallway felt longer than usual, like the building itself was stretching away from me. When I glanced up in the rearview mirror, I saw the front door close. Locked. That was the moment something shifted. Not anger. Not panic. Clarity. They weren't confused. They weren't mistaken. They were confident. And confidence only comes from believing the paperwork is on your side. When I got home, I didn't cry. I sat at the small kitchen table in my temporary rental and opened my laptop. My hands shook just enough to slow me down. There was a folder in my email I rarely checked. Automatically filtered. Buried. I'd labeled it miscellaneous years ago and forgotten about it. Inside was a PDF titled Updated Property Trust Draft. The file date stopped me cold. 2 years earlier. The year I'd been hospitalized with a severe infection. The year my husband had brought documents to my bedside and said, just formal stuff, in case something happens. I clicked the file. The language was dense but familiar. My name appeared throughout. Trustee. Primary holder. Owner. I scrolled. At the end was a signature line. Blank. I stared at it until my eyes burned. I called the number listed on the document, expecting voicemail. Instead, a tired voice answered. Property Law Office. I gave my name. There was a pause. Keyboard sounds. Then, you're still listed as the sole owner. My grip tightened on the phone. Someone told law enforcement I'm not. Another pause. Longer this time. That transfer was never completed, the voice said. No filed signature. No legal change. I closed my eyes. Relief didn't feel warm. It felt sharp, like realizing how close you were to falling without knowing it. That night, I drove back to the flat. Not to enter, just to look. The lights were on. Curtains open. My furniture arranged differently. A new plant in the window I used to water. Someone else was already living comfortably inside my name. The next morning, my husband stopped by my rental unannounced, carrying coffee, acting normal. We might redo the balcony, he said casually. Vanessa knows someone. Who's paying? I asked. He smiled. From the household account. My account. I asked. The smile faltered. You're overthinking, he said. Let's not start anything. I nodded. I won't. Not yet. That afternoon, he left his phone on the counter while he showered. A notification lit the screen. She still thinks it's hers. I didn't hesitate. I opened the message thread. 6 names. A group chat titled Next Steps. I read every line. Dates. Plans. Timelines. Discussions about moving me out cleanly. About how long I'd last before giving up. About how convenient it was that I didn't like confrontation. I set the phone back exactly where it was when he came out. I smiled. They believed silence meant surrender. They had no idea silence meant preparation. That night, sleep never really came. I lay on the narrow bed in my rental, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked in uneven rhythm, replaying every line I'd read on that screen. Not with panic, with focus, the kind that settles in when something finally makes sense. They weren't reacting to me. They were managing me. By morning, I had a list. Not dramatic, not emotional, just facts. I owned the flat. Someone had installed locks without my consent. Law enforcement had been misled. Financial access had been shared without authorization. And plans were already in motion to make my absence permanent. I started with the bank. Summit Crest Financial sat on the corner of a busy street downtown. Glass walls reflecting people who believed money problems happened to other families. I used to bank there in person all the time. The tellers used to greet me by name. That day, the woman at the front desk studied my ID longer than necessary. I just need to review a household account, I said. Primary holder. Her fingers tapped the keyboard. Paused. Tapped again. It looks like there was a recent update, she said carefully. How recent? I asked. About 10 days ago. 10 days ago was when my husband told me I should rest more. When he said he'd take care of the boring stuff. When he dropped off soup and kissed my forehead like I was fragile glass. I need to speak with a senior account manager, I said. She hesitated, then stood. Inside the glass office, a man with an expensive smile scrolled through screens too fast for me to follow. Many clients choose to add a secondary manager for convenience, he said smoothly, especially during stressful transitions. Remove the language, I replied. Tell me who was added. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa Clark. I nodded once. On what authority? He printed a form and slid it across the desk. The signature was mine, except it wasn't. My real signature leaned slightly right, deliberate and clean. This one wobbled. Letters uneven. The kind of handwriting you make when your hands are weak. I remembered that week clearly. Fever. Shaking. Barely able to lift a mug. They forged it, I said. The man's smile disappeared. I left with copies, timestamps, and a promise that the account would be frozen pending investigation. In my car, I didn't cry. I gripped the steering wheel and let the clarity settle deeper. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was execution. When I returned to the flat later that afternoon, the door was unlocked. Vanessa's shoes were by the entryway. My husband's jacket hung on the hook that used to hold mine. I didn't announce myself. That's when I heard it. A soft click. Mechanical. Faint. I stopped walking. Another click. Barely audible, like a breath being held too long. I followed the sound down the hallway, eyes scanning corners I'd walked past 1,000 times without thinking. The smoke detector blinked once. Just once. I dragged a chair from the kitchen and climbed up, heart steady in a way that scared me. When I twisted the cover, something small and black stared back at me. A camera. No wires. Battery powered. Wi-Fi enabled. Pointed directly toward the bedroom. I found 2 more. One hidden inside a decorative shelf piece. One tucked near the air vent above the living room. I lined them up on the dining table. When Vanessa walked in and saw them, she didn't scream. She didn't deny it. "Oh," she said softly. "Those are just in case something happens." "In case what happens?" I asked. She shrugged. "Falls. Confusion. Episodes." My husband stood behind her, silent. "I never agreed to this," I said. "It's for safety," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "No," I said calmly. "It's for control." They didn't apologize. They didn't explain. They just went quiet, like children caught, but not ashamed. That night, dinner was perfect. Plates warm. Napkins folded. Too careful. Too polite. They thought kindness would reset me. They were wrong. I emailed my lawyer at 1:42 a.m. Subject line: Immediate property and trust review. The reply came before sunrise. "You're within your rights," he wrote, "but this will escalate." I replied with one word: "Good." The next day, the cameras were gone. No explanation. No discussion. But it didn't matter. I had already placed my own. I met my lawyer that afternoon. Same office. Same worn leather chair. Same red pen cup with teeth marks on the ends. He read everything without interrupting. The bank form. The messages. The camera photos. "They've been planning this," he said finally. "Yes," I replied. "And they think I don't know." "You have full authority," he continued. "Property. Accounts. Residency. How fast can I act?" I asked. "With cause." He smiled thinly. 72 hours. He slid a document across the desk. Notice of revocation of residential permission. "I'll hold it," he said, "until you're ready." "I'm not done watching yet," I replied. When I returned to the flat, boxes lined the hallway. Labeled. Taped. One read, miscellaneous. Another, old stuff. A third, not needed. My name wasn't written anywhere. That evening, Vanessa suggested a nice dinner. Candles. Wine. Too many smiles. I arrived early. There were 4 place settings. 3 chairs. No one noticed until I spoke. "Is there a spare chair somewhere?" Vanessa blinked. "Oh, right." I pulled one in myself. They talked about renovations. Open layouts. Increasing value. "Our flat," Vanessa said casually. I didn't correct her. After dessert, a laptop appeared. Renderings of the space, my space without me in it. No guest room. No storage for my things. Where would I go? I asked. Vanessa laughed lightly. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Later that night, I heard whispering through the wall. "She'll adjust. She always does. If she causes trouble, we'll say she's unstable." The next morning, my nephew, too young to understand loyalty, looked up from his cereal and said quietly, "They're selling the flat." I smiled. "I know." At 10:14 a.m., the doorbell rang. A man in a blazer stood outside, tablet in hand. "I'm here to confirm measurements," he said cheerfully. "For the listing." "For what listing?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. My address. Photos of my bedroom. My kitchen. My life. I need to make a call, I said calmly. And that was the moment preparation became movement. I didn't raise my voice when I saw the listing. I didn't snatch the tablet from his hands or ask how long he'd been walking through my life without permission. I thanked the agent politely, closed the door, and locked it behind me. Then I stood still. That kind of stillness only comes when something final has already happened inside you. I took photos of everything. The listing page, the agent's name, the brokerage logo, the timestamp. I emailed it all to my lawyer before the kettle finished boiling. His reply came fast. They moved too soon. That afternoon, Vanessa acted like nothing was wrong. She hummed while chopping vegetables. She asked if I wanted soup. She avoided my eyes, which told me she knew something was wrong and didn't want to invite it into the room. I watched her hands. Steady, confident, the hands of someone who believed the ending was already written. I excused myself early and went to the garage. Behind old boxes and holiday decorations was a small metal file case I hadn't touched since before the separation. Inside were copies of everything that mattered. The original deed, county filings, a notarized trust addendum my lawyer had insisted on years ago, just in case. I scanned it all, saved 3 copies, 1 to my laptop, 1 to a flash drive, 1 uploaded to a secure cloud folder with a name so boring no one would ever open it. Then I sent 1 email. Subject: immediate removal of unauthorized listing. Body: I am the sole legal owner of the property listed below. This sale has not been authorized. All access must stop immediately. I signed it with my full legal name. The reply came 20 minutes later. Understood. Listing removed. We will contact the parties involved. I leaned back in the chair and let myself breathe for the first time that day. They left for the weekend the next morning. Spa trip. Paid in advance. Bags packed. Vanessa kissed my cheek like everything was normal. My husband avoided eye contact. I waved from the doorway. The locksmith arrived at noon. Professional. Quiet. Efficient. He didn't ask questions when I showed him the deed. He changed every exterior lock and handed me the old keys in a plastic bag. I labeled it obsolete and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I walked through the flat slowly. Not to clean, not to grieve, to reclaim. I moved my chair back to the window, took down Vanessa's mirror, hung the quilt my grandmother made, turned off the diffuser that always smelled like artificial calm. The flat exhaled with me. At 5 o'clock, I placed the eviction notice in an envelope and slid it into the drawer by the door. Not yet. Soon. They returned Sunday night. Vanessa tried the key once, twice, then knocked. What did you do? She demanded when I opened the door. I changed the locks, I said. You can't do that, my husband snapped. I already did. I handed them the envelope. 72 hours, I said calmly. After that, anything left becomes mine. Vanessa laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Then she pulled out her phone. Law enforcement arrived 20 minutes later. The same officer. He hesitated when he saw me. We've met, he said. Yes, I replied. She locked us out, Vanessa said loudly. She's unstable. This is abuse. The officer held up a hand and turned to me. Can I see documentation? I handed him the folder. He read every page, slowly, carefully. Finally, he looked up. You are the legal owner, he said. Yes. You revoked residency. I did. He turned back to them. You are trespassing. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. They left without another word. That night, I slept with the door unlocked. Not because I was careless, because I wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, I went to the basement. There was a box they'd never mentioned. Heavy, locked, hidden behind paint cans. Inside were bank statements, loan papers, insurance documents, and my dead father's name. They'd used it to secure funding, to open accounts, to take out a loan against the flat. I sat on the cold floor and stared at the proof. Then I called my lawyer. "They committed fraud," he said calmly after reviewing everything. "Serious fraud. Do I have to press charges?" I asked. "No," he said, "but you can make sure they never touch your life again." That was enough. The next day, I signed an emergency asset freeze. Every account, every trust, locked. Vanessa texted that night, "We need to talk." I replied, "Breakfast." They arrived nervous, smiling too much. I served eggs, toast, coffee. When the plates were empty, I turned on the television. Security footage filled the screen. Vanessa's voice, clear, confident, laughing. "She won't notice. She's not really living here anymore. We'll move her out slowly." Silence followed. I slid the final eviction notice across the table. "You have 48 hours. My husband didn't speak. Vanessa tried to. I raised my hand. "You're done." They left before noon. I didn't watch them go, because I was already moving forward. By the time the door closed behind them, the flat felt different. Not quiet in a fragile way, but settled, like dust after something heavy finally drops. I stood at the sink for a long moment, hands resting on the cool edge, listening to nothing but my own breathing. 48 hours. That was what I had given them. Not mercy, not cruelty, just time measured cleanly, legally, without emotion. They didn't spend those hours packing calmly. I knew that because my phone didn't stop lighting up. First came the messages from my husband. Long ones, defensive ones, explanations stacked on explanations, each sentence trying to soften the one before it. Words like misunderstanding, stress, pressure. "We never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond. Then came Vanessa's messages. Shorter, sharper, accusations wrapped in disbelief. "You blindsided us. This didn't have to be so extreme. You're overreacting." I muted the thread. Silence is a boundary when you stop using it as a shield. The second night, I heard movement outside the flat around midnight. Not loud, careful, like people trying not to be noticed. I didn't open the door. I didn't check the camera feed immediately. I waited, letting whoever it was realize the space no longer belonged to them. In the morning, I reviewed the footage. Vanessa, my husband, boxes, raised voices, pointing, a hand hitting the doorframe in frustration. No attempt to break in, just disbelief. They still thought something would change. It didn't. At noon on the second day, a moving truck arrived. I watched from the window, arms folded loosely, heart steady. They worked fast then, less arguing, more urgency. Reality tends to speed people up. Vanessa looked up once and met my eyes through the glass. She didn't wave. She didn't glare. She just stared, like she was trying to memorize the version of me she'd underestimated. By evening, the flat was empty of them. I changed the locks again. Not because it was necessary, because it felt right. That night, I went through every room slowly, opening drawers, checking closets, making sure nothing had been hidden, damaged, or quietly claimed. I found small things, cheap jewelry, mismatched socks, a receipt folded into a book. I placed everything in a box and labeled it clearly. Property to be collected. Appointment required. Then I sealed it and set it by the door. The following morning, my lawyer called. "They're asking if you'll reconsider," he said. I smiled faintly. "No." "Good," he replied, "because there's more." He told me the bank had completed the internal review. The forged signature had triggered a wider audit, not just of the shared account, but of any account tied to my name, my property, or my former household. "They're nervous," he said, "and when institutions get nervous, they document everything." I closed my eyes briefly, not from relief, from confirmation. That afternoon, I received an email from a loan officer I'd never met. Subject line: request for clarification regarding collateral. The attachment listed the flat as leverage for a business loan. Vanessa's business, a consulting venture that existed mostly on paper and optimism. Collateral: my property. Authorization: my name. I forwarded it to my lawyer without comment. He called me back 10 minutes later. They used your asset without legal authority, he said, and they lied about your capacity. I leaned back in my chair. What happens next? That depends on how far you want to take it. I thought about the cameras, the listing, the whispers, the confidence with which they'd spoken about moving me out of my own life. I don't want punishment, I said slowly. I want separation. That can be arranged. The legal filings moved quickly after that. Emergency injunctions, notices of misrepresentation, formal declarations revoking any implied authority my husband might have claimed. Everything clean, everything documented. Vanessa showed up at the flat 3 days later. She didn't knock. She rang the bell repeatedly, sharp presses like she was trying to break something without touching it. I opened the door with my phone already recording. What do you want? I asked calmly. This is insane, she said. You're ruining lives. I'm protecting mine, I replied. She scoffed. You think this makes you powerful. I looked at her carefully, really looked. I think this makes me finished, I said. With you. She stepped closer. You can't just erase us. I smiled slightly. I didn't. You erased yourselves. She stood there for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. That was the last time she came to the door. My husband sent one final message a week later. I don't recognize you anymore. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Then I wrote one sentence and sent it. You never tried to. After that, the noise stopped. Weeks passed. The flat settled into a rhythm that felt like mine again. I rearranged furniture, donated what I didn't need, opened windows I'd kept closed for months without realizing why. One afternoon, while sorting through paperwork, I found an old sticky note tucked into the back of a folder, written in my handwriting from years ago. Always keep copies. I laughed quietly. The bank finalized the fraud review the following month. Vanessa's business accounts were closed. The loan application was voided. Notes added. Flags placed. I wasn't copied on most of it. I didn't need to be. The legal advisor called one last time to confirm everything was complete. No loose ends, he said. No outstanding claims. Thank you, I replied. When the call ended, I stood in the living room and took a long look around. The flat wasn't a symbol anymore. It was just a place. And that was the most powerful thing about it. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself and ate slowly, savoring the ordinary piece of it. No one watching. No one measuring my reactions. No one planning around my silence. I slept deeply that night. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't dream about doors closing. I dreamed about space. The morning after the dreams changed, I woke up without that familiar tightness in my chest. No rehearsed conversations playing in my head. No instinct to check messages before my feet touched the floor. Just quiet that didn't feel like waiting. I made coffee and drank it by the window, watching the city wake up. People walking dogs. A delivery truck idling too long. Ordinary life, continuing without any awareness of how close my own had come to being rewritten by someone else. That realization stayed with me all day. The flat was officially, undeniably mine again. Not just on paper, but in practice. No shared access. No financial overlap. No implied permissions lingering in the background. Every account was separate. Every document updated. Every loose thread tied off. Still, endings have a way of checking whether you mean them. The final test came a week later. A letter arrived by certified mail. No return address printed on the envelope, but I knew before opening it. Some instincts don't fade. Inside was a single-page statement. Not legal, not emotional, just factual. Vanessa was disputing the eviction timeline, claiming verbal agreements and implied consent. No evidence attached, just language meant to intimidate, to test whether I'd flinch. I didn't. I forwarded it to my lawyer and went back to what I was doing, sorting through a box of old photographs I hadn't touched since before the separation. The reply came that evening. She has no standing, my lawyer wrote. Will respond formally. You don't need to engage. And that was that. The next correspondence never came. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something steadier. I stopped bracing for interruptions. Stopped explaining my choices to people who didn't live with the consequences. I donated the box of items they'd left behind after the collection window passed. Nothing valuable. Just remnants of a life that no longer intersected with mine. I repainted the bedroom. A soft, warm color that caught the light differently throughout the day. I replaced the locks one final time. Not because I needed to, but because it felt symbolic, like closing a chapter properly instead of letting it trail off. One afternoon, while updating files, I found the original police incident report from that first day. The wording was clinical, neutral, detached. Unauthorized presence reported. Resident feels unsafe. No proof of ownership provided at time of contact. I read it once, then shredded it. That version of the story no longer applied. I ran into my husband unexpectedly at a coffee shop a month later. No dramatic build-up. Just coincidence. He looked tired. Smaller somehow. We acknowledged each other with a nod. Nothing more. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been settled. When I walked back out onto the street, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires connection. This was closure. That night, I sat on the floor of the living room with my back against the couch, lights dim, music low. I thought about how quietly everything had happened. No shouting matches. No public spectacle. No moment anyone else would label as dramatic. And yet, my entire life had shifted direction. Not because I fought louder. Because I stopped stepping back. I didn't win anything flashy. I didn't prove anything to anyone who mattered. I simply refused to disappear. The flat became a place of routines again. Morning coffee. Evening walks. Friends dropping by without tension in the air. Laughter that didn't feel measured or careful. Every now and then, I caught myself smiling for no reason. That's how I knew it was over. If you're still listening, still here, maybe some part of this felt familiar. Being slowly edged out. Being spoken over. Being expected to accept a version of events that benefits everyone except you. If that's the case, remember this. Clarity is power. Presence is power. And silence, when chosen, can be stronger than noise. Before you go, support this story by subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment about where you're watching from. Stories like this don't spread on their own, and someone out there might need to hear that staying quiet doesn't mean staying powerless.